Hello, welcome back to the continuing lecture in investment analysis. Now, this is Dr. Jeff Holm, and we just finished free cash flow model exercise, and so we are moving on to the next slide. The next slide is actually slightly it's a misnomer, so I would have to. I mean, the title, it was still free cash flow model, but let me make it. Again, let's just 13.8. Okay, or what should that be? Just 13, right? Problems with discounted cash flow models, right? Now, so what are the problems of discounted cash flow models? Also, that includes DDM, dividend discount models, right? Which is part of the discounted subset of discounted cash flow. Comparing when you are comparing valuation models, right? Of course, no model is perfect. Model values may differ in practice, and the differences stem from assumptions. Of course, we have to limit assumptions, and we cannot have. It's always the parsimonious rule of parsimony. The minimum, if only the minimum necessary. I mean, if you have too many assumptions, all these assumptions are acting as constraint to the model. And sometimes, if the model is too constrained, the output of the model would be very almost prohibitive. It's very restrictive. Simplify assumptions, and the problems are DCF estimates are always so imprecise. Yeah, but what else is there? I mean, it is still no other valuation models are more precise than DCF. I mean, price. The only other model for valuation is price earnings multiple model, which is kind of primitive, compared to DCF model. So investors, it's not actually, even if it is somewhat imprecise, it's the best we have for now. And investors employ a hierarchy of valuation because of the slight imprecision of the DCF model. Obviously, future cash flows are a thing of it's kind of virtual, right? In other words, it's not concrete. Nothing is concrete because it's future. It's a forecast. It cannot be concrete, right? So obviously, whatever is, they prefer concrete cash flows rather than forecast or projected cash flow. So in that sense, real estate, plant, and equipment, in other words, fixed assets, they are all fixed assets or physical assets, right? Real assets. They are most reliable components that allow for a reasonable estimate of market value, right? Um, and economic profit on assets in place are considered less reliable components. Why? Because economic profit or any profit, I mean, there are accounting profits and economic profits. So the difference is that the economic profits also consider, opportunity cost and depreciation, the replacement cost, or but economic profit is still a projection, and of course, accounting profit is also a projection, but it's economic because of the opportunity cost. The economic profit is more difficult to actually, nail down, right? Growth opportunities. This is really a hot air, just balloon full of hot air. We don't know. That's the least reliable components. I mean, if Tesla was so hot, but after stock split, they dropped almost 10%, or more than probably 10%. Why? Because a lot about Tesla is growth opportunities. A lot of uh, the price, Tesla's price, comes from present value of growth opportunities, and this is just very speculative, speculative component, right? And in that sense, that's the most least reliable, right? So obviously, in valuation, there is a hierarchy, right? Now, other than that, you learned in Finance 100 what to do with price earnings ratio, how valuation can, stock price valuation can be derived from a model called price earnings multiple model. And price earnings multiple model is based on, estimating, stock price at time zero, right? And of course, this is rational price, right? I said, intrinsic value. I use this for a symbol of intrinsic value. Yeah. But what is the difference? I mean, why? They are basically the same thing, but usually this is okay. Let me do it this way. I use S, right, for symbol for individual stock. In other words, it's the per share value. This is the value of common stock, equity, right? And if you divide it by number of shares, right? Uh-oh. Oh, please bear with me. This is not a very this draw feature on Microsoft Office. I mean, this is relatively new because like 2007 Microsoft Office products didn't have this, but or 2010 products didn't have this, but they have it. So this is per share. So what they're trying to do was multiply earnings per share, and that's earnings per share data at time one, right? I mean, it doesn't have to be time one, but it's normally and if this is the company, let's put X here to represent company X. Okay. And earnings per share of company X. This doesn't look, what should I do? This doesn't look like, okay, I'll put it down here. So company X. Now, you multiply P ratio, price earnings ratio. And that way, the idea is that way you can price the stock, right? That's the. But then you saw this in the they they found equity value this way. Using the EAT, which is aggregate. But then the next the question is then, isn't this, if you do this, wouldn't that be just price again, right? Wouldn't that be let me put it the other way, the other side. Think about it. Wouldn't it be simply price back to price? Why? Market price, right? Market price. Why? This is earnings per share. This is earnings per share, right? So won't they cancel out and it will eventually be market price? Then how would that be intrinsic value? How would that be intrinsic value? Huh? Unless the market is not making any mistake and pricing it exactly, pricing it correctly. How can that be? No. So obviously this is not this is not this is not the case. I mean, this is not what we're trying to do. I mean, that would be very stupid, because, right? Simply you are just to get market price back. No. But the math would make it like that. Actually, the math not there is so it won't have to be like this. And why? Because this price earnings ratio is the industry average. Okay. Industry average, right? What does that mean? So you apply to the earnings per share, right? To earnings per share, you apply industry average price earnings ratio, average price earnings ratio for that industry. And then what does that mean? If industry price earnings ratio is 20 and this company's earnings per share is $5, through the lens of this industry, right, which on average has price earnings ratio of 20, it would be quite reasonable to expect the price that would be 20 times the earnings per share of this company, right? Because that's industry, like industry standard, right? So that means, it won't be exactly, because of that, it won't be exactly equal to the, it won't be equal to the market price of this stock, okay? It won't be equal to the market price of this stock, okay? Won't be. So then, so this is how you use, price earnings multiple to value the stock. But that was actually Finance 100 material, right? Now, what do we do with, here? Let's look further into the price earnings ratio. We all know, right? We did this in the, before we did, DCF, right? Briefly. And let's just go back to just to remind which one was that? The slide somewhere here. Yeah. To define what is the what's the present value of growth opportunity? Present value of growth opportunity, right, is the difference between the no growth stock and the growth stock. And no growth stock doesn't pay out any dividends, so it pays out its entire earnings as a dividend, right? So then there's no growth, right? So E1 over K is the no growth, how you price the no growth stock. So solve this for, if you solve this for, think about it. If I solve this, so here, no growth stock. No growth. Come on. Oh, yeah. Oh. It is simply E1 over K. Actually, it's Gordon growth model, K minus G, right? Our growth rate is 0, right? That's why. Now then, if you let's let's multiply this, distribute this. This will become 1 over K, right? And right, if you distribute 1 over k, and this term will become simply, they cancel out and become simply PVGO over E1. And then if you saw, so then, by first, and then if you solve this for P0, right? It will become this, right? Which is, price of the growth stock, right? Growth stock, the difference between the no growth stock and growth stock is, this PVGO, right? And so PVGO can be defined as price of the growth stock minus E1 over K, earnings, right? Earnings per share, right? Over K. Now, also we know that P0, I mean, normally this is, how you value the Gordon growth model. Normally I would, S0 here, because P is market price. That looks kind of, but I'm just following, I'm using the book, what the notation they use in the book. Actually, if it is up to me, I would do this, right? But the book is using, P0 as, intrinsic value, right? You understand, I make distinction between, intrinsic value and demise, but, the book is basically making an assumption that the market is correctly pricing the stock. So the market price of the stock is equal to intrinsic value of the stock. Now, and this is, we all understand this is the case. No growth stock, that's the case. Plowback ratio is 0, right? Now, before we go further, let's just, for those people who may want, and this is quite, if you wonder how we got to, from here to here, think about it. If you distribute, right, this, and of course you guys, I'm sure you understand, but it's just working out. Now, think about it. This becomes then, 1 over K, right? And this one is 1 over K times, that doesn't look like K, but 1 over K times, what's this, PVGO, so PVGO times K over E1. right? And this k and this k will cancel out, and it becomes this, right? Now, and the difference between these two, models, right? This is growth, uh, growth form. This is no growth form, right? Um, dividend is what? Actually, dividend is what's left after plowing back, isn't it right? Dividend is left after plowing back. So 1 minus b, and 1 minus b is what? Actually, uh, it's dividend payout ratio, right? Isn't it right? 1 minus b is dividend payout ratio. Okay, I cannot write, right? D being, dividend payout ratio. Dividend payout ratio, right? So, and then in golden growth model, K minus G, right? And what is growth rate? Growth rate is exactly, we defined that in previously, right? Uh, ROE, return on equity, times, uh, plowback ratio. So in other words, it's an intersection. In other words, it's a product of those two, right? In other words, it's like a uh, correlation or covariance between the two. So anyway, and think about it. So if we rewrite price earnings ratio according to this, then you divide it by earnings, then uh, and divide both sides by earnings. This will be canceled out. In other words, E1 here, and the whole thing by E1 here, cancel out, right? I don't have to write that again, right? So this is another way of finding price earnings ratio, defining price earnings ratio, but it also write it for P. I mean, this is very important. This is another way of, very important way of finding stock price. I mean, this is relatively, as I said, this is relatively uh, inaccurate, right? Because you're using industry average. But here, this is the company's data, right? This is exactly the company's data. So earnings from the and company's plowback ratio, required return. Wonderful. I mean, it's golden growth model, but using plowback ratio and you know plowback ratio and ROE, right? Golden growth model. So this way, you can do well. Again, this is still a discounted cash flow model, right? But without directly using dividend, but earnings data, earnings per share, right? So this is another way of doing valuing stock. Improvement over old, P multiple method. Okay, so that's it for this video. So let me uh, I'll stop recording and I will